find these resort fees are disgusting.
You probably never imagined that a single offhand comment could alter an entire industry like tourism. However, after a controversial statement, the U.S. tourism sector has faced a major shock. Losing nearly $30 billion in revenue from Canadian visitors, America is now dealing with the consequences of political decisions. While cities like Florida and Las Vegas remain as charming as ever, the decline in Canadian tourists has directly impacted hotels, stores, and famous landmarks. This change serves as a reminder that political decisions can have far-reaching effects on everyday citizens, especially in the tourism industry. So, the question is, can the U.S. restore its strong tourism relationship with Canada, or will the tourism sector suffer long-term losses? What are your thoughts on this? If you agree with the impact of politics on U.S. tourism, comment 1 below. If you don't agree, drop a 0. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Tourism in the U.S. has experienced significant fluctuations in recent years, and one of the most notable factors has been the sharp decline in visitors from Canada. Popular U.S. destinations like Florida, Las Vegas, Buffalo, and Maine have long been top choices for Canadian tourists, contributing significantly to the U.S. tourism revenue. However, changes in policy and security issues have led to a dramatic drop in the number of Canadian visitors. For years, Canadian tourists have played a crucial role in the U.S. tourism industry. Not only is Canada a major market with millions of visitors annually, but Canadians also make substantial contributions to the economy of large U.S. cities. Cities like Buffalo, near the border, have always been favorites for Canadian tourists, with short trips and considerable spending at stores, hotels, and restaurants. However, a series of political events have led to a noticeable shift. Statistics show a sharp 37% drop in Canadian visitors at border checkpoints and a 26% decline in international flights. This is not just a number, but a warning sign of a change in international tourism dynamics. Key reasons include political tensions between the two countries, new border policies, and the sense of insecurity felt by some tourists when visiting the U.S. The decline in Canadian tourism has had serious consequences for the U.S. tourism economy. Hotel and shop owners in major destinations like Las Vegas, Maine, and Buffalo have shared the difficulties they face. Revenue has dropped to the point where hotels have had to reduce room rates, and some stores have cut staff to maintain operations. Small business owners report a 30% drop in revenue, a figure that cannot be ignored in the tourism industry. Hotel owners at major resorts in Florida and Las Vegas also report that Canadian visitors accounted for a significant portion of their international guests. Not only did they contribute to direct revenue from room bookings, but Canadian tourists also spent on services such as dining, shopping, and entertainment, contributing to the development of various service industries in these regions. Now their absence has created a significant gap that businesses need to find ways to fill. This event clearly highlights the importance of maintaining stable diplomatic relations between countries, especially those with strong tourism exchanges like the U.S. and Canada. Decisions in politics and changes in border policies can have far-reaching impacts on the tourism economy, which in turn affects industries reliant on international guests. The U.S. tourism industry can learn from this decline in Canadian visitors about the importance of not being overly dependent on a single source of tourists. Instead of focusing solely on traditional tourism markets like Canada, the U.S. should expand its marketing strategy to target emerging markets such as Asia, the Middle East, and South America. Creative marketing strategies, special offers for international tourists, and the development of new tourism products can help replace the loss of Canadian tourists. For hotel owners and retailers, the lesson here is the necessity of flexibility in adjusting operations during periods of volatility. Rather than relying on one customer group, tourism businesses need to develop diversified income strategies and find ways to attract new customer segments, especially during crises. Tourism experts argue that quickly and accurately grasping changes in international policies and travel demands is vital to the survival of this industry. Therefore, travel companies and tourism organizations need to have the ability to react flexibly to changes in the international travel market. The adoption of new technologies to monitor tourism trends and interact with tourists can help the industry maintain steady and sustainable growth. The decline in Canadian tourism has proven the importance of maintaining stable international relations and diversifying tourist sources. While this drop in visitors has caused significant losses to the U.S. tourism economy, it also presents an opportunity for the industry to learn and develop more sustainable strategies in the future. Hopefully, this lesson will help U.S. tourism managers and businesses develop a better future where tourism is not only a source of income but also a bridge between countries, fostering peace and shared prosperity. The decline in Canadian visitors has had noticeable effects on the tourism economy in many of the U.S.'s prominent regions. Florida is a prime example of how the absence of Canadian tourists has significantly reduced the local tourism revenue. Florida has always been a top tourist destination, known for its beautiful beaches, amusement parks, and warm tropical climate. Every year, Florida welcomes millions of tourists from around the world, with Canadians accounting for a substantial portion of these visitors. For years, Canadian tourists have contributed significantly to Florida's economy through activities such as renting vacation homes, participating in tours, dining at local restaurants, and shopping at malls. However, in recent years, due to changes in border policies and political developments, the number of Canadian visitors has dropped dramatically. Reports from tourism businesses in Florida show that the absence of Canadian tourists has led to a noticeable decline in revenue. Hotels and resorts have seen lower occupancy rates, while local shops and restaurants are no longer experiencing the strong spending habits of Canadian tourists. These visitors typically come to Florida during the winter to escape the cold back home and are willing to spend on long-term activities, from renting vacation homes to dining out and shopping at large stores. In the past, Canadian tourists not only came to Florida for sightseeing, but also spent more on long-term services. Canadian families often rented vacation homes or apartments for the entire winter, spending large amounts on dining at local restaurants, as well as participating in recreational activities such as boating, visiting amusement parks, or taking local tours. These expenditures contributed significantly to the maintenance of restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment services in Florida. However, the absence of Canadian tourists has drastically changed spending habits. Families who once spent lavishly on long-term activities are now more cautious or have stopped coming to Florida altogether, resulting in a decline in spending. Instead of staying for long periods at resorts, many tourists now only visit for short durations or seek alternative destinations with lower costs or fewer political impacts. As the number of Canadian tourists has decreased, restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment services in Florida have been faced with a severe revenue drop. Restaurants, which have long depended on international visitors, especially Canadians, have seen significant decreases in customer numbers. Not only have revenues fallen, but restaurants have also had to adjust their employee working hours to align with the new situation. This has led to many employees not earning enough to maintain their livelihoods, and some stores have had to reduce staff or cut hours, which impacts service quality and the viability of businesses. Retail stores are no exception. Large shopping malls in Florida, which were popular destinations for Canadian tourists, are now witnessing a drop in revenue. Famous brands and souvenir shops are facing a decline in customers, especially during peak tourist seasons. This creates a vicious cycle where lower revenues result in insufficient budgets to sustain operations or expand businesses. To cope with the absence of Canadian tourists, regions like Florida need to find ways to diversify their tourist sources and enhance their marketing strategies. Instead of focusing solely on one specific customer group, tourism businesses should explore new markets, such as countries in Asia, Europe, or South America, where there is significant potential for tourism growth. In addition, flexible tourism policies and attractive offers can help draw international visitors, particularly during difficult times. Furthermore, businesses need to adjust their strategies to align with changing consumer behavior. Increasing investment in online services, developing long-term travel products, and creating special promotions can help maintain a stable flow of tourists and mitigate the impact of the absence of Canadian visitors. The decline in Canadian tourism is not only a warning about the impact of politics on the tourism industry, but also an opportunity for U.S. tourism businesses to reassess sustainable development strategies. Changes in spending habits and the drop in revenue are factors that need to be carefully considered, and from this, Businesses can learn how to be flexible and creative to survive and thrive in this ever-changing environment. The significant decline in Canadian tourists has had profound consequences, not only for major cities like Florida and Las Vegas, but also for border towns and small communities, where international tourism, especially from Canada, plays a crucial role in sustaining the local economy. Border cities such as Buffalo, Maine, and Vermont have long been popular tourist destinations for Canadian visitors. Due to their favorable geographic locations, these cities have frequently welcomed large numbers of Canadian tourists, especially during holiday seasons and extended vacations. Canadian visitors not only come to these areas for sightseeing, but also spend generously on services like shopping, dining, and accommodations. However, the recent decrease in Canadian visitors has created serious impacts on the economies of these border cities. Retail stores, restaurants, and entertainment services, which have heavily relied on Canadian tourists, now face a dramatic drop in customer numbers. Retail shops are seeing significant revenue losses as they no longer have Canadian tourists willing to spend on high-end items or local specialty products. Losing such a large number of customers, especially international ones, has led many stores and restaurants to struggle with their operations. Small shops in border areas that once relied on Canadian tourist spending are now facing closures or reductions in staff hours. Restaurants with significantly fewer customers are unable to maintain their workforce, forcing them to reduce hours or eliminate non-essential services to save costs. This situation not only causes economic damage, but also affects the livelihoods of those working in the service industry. Restaurant owners and small store owners are faced with difficult decisions about whether to maintain their staff or shut down, leading to fewer job opportunities in these communities. Small communities near the border, which rely heavily on the tourism industry, have been deeply and permanently affected by this decline. The reduction in Canadian visitors has not only impacted small businesses, but also directly influenced the income of local residents. In small towns, many people depend on tourism-related jobs such as hotel staff, tour guides, or retail workers. When Canadian tourists are no longer visiting, these jobs vanish, leading to increased unemployment and significant income reductions in these communities. Furthermore, some local investment plans, such as building new tourism infrastructure or expanding resort services, have been delayed or canceled. Investors, who had hoped for an influx of international tourists, are now forced to adjust their plans to cope with the uncertainty of tourism income. The absence of Canadian tourists has forced service and retail companies to reduce staff. The income loss and lack of job opportunities not only affect those directly employed in tourism, but also have a wider impact on the overall economy of border towns. Workers unable to find new jobs in the area are facing difficulties, as most available jobs are tied to the tourism sector. Local families are facing financial hardship due to the loss of stable income. Many families have to cut back on spending for essential needs such as food, healthcare, and education, creating a vicious cycle that is hard to break. The income reduction not only affects the quality of life, but also hinders the long-term development of these communities. Business owners and investors in border areas have had to adjust their investment and resort plans. Previously, they expected increased investment in infrastructure and services to cater to the large number of Canadian tourists. However, the current situation has forced them to pause or postpone these projects. Plans to build new hotels, resorts, or amusement parks have been delayed due to concerns over the decline in international tourist numbers and the unstable economic climate. Moreover, the absence of Canadian tourists has also impacted local recreational activities. Border areas, once famous for their tours, outdoor activities, and special events, are no longer attracting the same level of visitors. This not only reduces the area's appeal, but also creates challenges for future tourism development plans. The decline in Canadian tourists has had a severe impact not only on major cities, but also on border towns and small communities. What do you think about this situation? Can these communities find solutions to cope with these changes and recover their economies? Comment 1 if you agree, or 0 if you disagree. Enjoy the video and don't forget to like, share, and leave us a subscription to support the channel and continue following interesting stories about the impact of tourism and the ongoing economic challenges. In recent years, a strong boycott movement has emerged in Canada against American products, which has become a significant factor impacting the U.S. economy, especially in export industries. Canadian consumers' actions, such as refusing to spend money on American food products, wines, and whiskeys, have led to a substantial shift in consumption habits and severely affected certain U.S. industries. One of the key drivers behind the boycott in Canada is the refusal to purchase American products. Canadians have started to avoid spending money on American-made goods, particularly food products, wines, and whiskeys. This movement is largely driven by political tensions and dissatisfaction with U.S. government policies. The Canadian community has demonstrated its opposition by actively avoiding American-made food products or brands of wine, reflecting discontent with U.S. decisions. In addition to directly boycotting American products, many Canadians have sought alternatives, opting for domestic products or those from other countries. Canadian brands and manufacturers have benefited from this shift as consumers return to their homegrown products, creating a new cash flow in the local economy. The boycott is not just a rejection of American products. It is also a powerful patriotic statement by Canadians. One of the ways consumers carry this out is through scanning barcodes on products before purchasing them. Mobile apps have been developed to help consumers check the origins of products, allowing them to make purchasing decisions based on a sense of patriotism. The development of these apps has changed the shopping habits of many people. Some communities have even organized campaigns to encourage Canadians to only buy domestic products or items from countries without political disputes with Canada. This situation not only affects American businesses, but also creates a powerful wave of consumer action in Canada, impacting markets for American exports. One of the most affected industries from this boycott movement is the American wine industry. The Canadian boycott of American wines has led to a more than 60% drop in wine exports to Canada. Canada has long been an important market for the U.S. wine industry, but changes in Canadian consumption habits have dramatically reduced sales for American wine producers. Famous wine brands from regions like Napa Valley, California, once popular in Canada, now face a sharp decline in consumption. This impact is felt not only by small wine producers, but also by large companies as they face revenue and profit losses. The American wine industry has not only lost a large portion of the Canadian market, but also faces increasing competition from countries like Chile, Argentina, and European nations, which are ramping up exports to the Canadian market. This situation presents a significant challenge for American wine producers in maintaining their market position internationally. The Canadian boycott is not just a temporary reaction, but may create long-lasting effects on the U.S. economy. When American products lose support from a large market like Canada, it not only affects specific industries, but also creates a consumer backlash that could spread to other countries, especially in the context of globalization and interconnected economies. The U.S. export industry, particularly in food, wine, and consumer goods, will face major challenges in regaining market share and rebuilding international consumer trust. Effective marketing strategies and the maintenance of stable diplomatic relationships between nations will be crucial in preventing boycott movements from spreading and causing long-term damage to the economy. The boycott of American products by Canadians has had severe consequences for U.S. industries, especially in the food, wine, and consumer goods sectors. The patriotic actions of Canadians, through avoiding American products and seeking alternatives, have created a significant shift in consumption habits and deeply impacted the U.S. economy. U.S. businesses and manufacturers will need to develop flexible solutions to cope with this situation, from creating effective marketing strategies to maintaining stable diplomatic relations with international partners. Tourism has always played a crucial role in the U.S. economy, and in recent years, shifts in consumer habits and tourist demographics have significantly impacted some of the nation's top tourist destinations. A clear example of this is the shift in cities like Las Vegas, which have moved from primarily catering to Canadian tourists to seeking new markets such as China and Mexico. However, this shift has not been easy and is filled with challenges. In the past, Las Vegas and many other popular U.S. tourist cities were heavily reliant on large numbers of Canadian visitors. Due to the proximity and stable diplomatic relations, Canadian tourists became a key part of the tourism revenue for these cities. They regularly visited the U.S. for vacations, participated in entertainment activities, shopped, and spent considerable amounts on travel services. However, changes in border policies and political factors have drastically reduced the number of Canadian tourists, forcing cities like Las Vegas to look for alternative markets. China and Mexico have become two potential markets that U.S. tourist cities are now targeting. China, with its large population and growing middle class, is seen as a promising market for U.S. tourism. Additionally, Mexico, with its geographic proximity and stable flow of tourists, is also an important option for U.S. cities. However, the shift from Canadian tourists to these new markets is not a simple process. These markets not only have different characteristics and consumption habits, but also pose several challenges related to language, culture, and how to tailor tourism services to meet their needs. Canadian tourists were very familiar with U.S. tourism services. Travel between the two countries was easy and affordable, making Canadian tourists a loyal customer base for U.S. tourist destinations. But shifting focus to markets like China and Mexico is not without its difficulties. Chinese tourists, despite their strong financial potential, have different needs and consumption habits. They often seek unique experiences that differ from what they have back home. Moreover, many Chinese tourists tend to travel in groups or through large tour packages, requiring U.S. travel companies to adapt their tours and entertainment activities to accommodate these preferences. Mexico, while geographically and culturally closer, has its own distinct travel habits. Mexican tourists tend to seek more local destinations, lower costs, and family-oriented experiences. Adapting marketing strategies to attract Mexican tourists requires a deep understanding of this market and creating more suitable tourism products. The shift from Canadian tourists to new markets like China and Mexico also reflects a broader change in the consumption habits of international travelers. Canadian tourists, who were accustomed to U.S. tourism services, often spent more on long vacations, renting vacation homes, dining at upscale restaurants, and participating in high-end entertainment activities. In contrast, tourists from China and Mexico have different consumption patterns. Chinese tourists often look for premium, unique experiences, but also seek more budget-friendly options for independent or small group travel. Meanwhile, Mexican tourists, although culturally similar, tend to look for more budget-conscious services and family or community-based experiences. This requires U.S. travel businesses to adjust their approach and develop products that suit each specific customer group. Travel companies need to build flexible marketing programs and tailor their services to meet the diverse needs and preferences of tourists from these emerging markets. One of the biggest challenges the U.S. tourism industry faces is reclaiming lost customers, particularly Canadian tourists. These tourists were very familiar with U.S. tourism services and could easily return if there are changes in policies or more favorable conditions. However, replacing them with markets like China and Mexico is no simple task. U.S. travel businesses will need to invest heavily in marketing strategies and product improvements to attract back those tourists who have left, while also maintaining their appeal to new markets. This may involve developing special promotions, organizing international events, and creating tourism services that cater to each target market group. The future of U.S. tourism is facing significant challenges as it shifts from Canadian tourists to new markets like China and Mexico. This transition is not an easy one and requires tourism businesses to quickly adapt to changes in consumer habits and the needs of international tourists. While seeking alternative markets is necessary, it is crucial for travel businesses to develop sustainable strategies to maintain their appeal to traditional tourists, while also expanding their offerings to meet the needs of emerging markets. In today's political environment, decisions related to tariffs, foreign policies, and sanctions may yield political victories for leaders or governments. However, these victories can sometimes result in significant economic damage, particularly affecting ordinary citizens, especially those working in small businesses and service industries. Amid tariff wars and other political decisions, labor groups such as hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers are the most directly and severely impacted. Tariff wars are often used by politicians as a tool to protect domestic industries or to apply pressure on other countries. However, While politicians may believe they've achieved their objectives of safeguarding domestic industries or pressuring international rivals, these decisions can have severe repercussions on the U.S. economy, particularly for ordinary people and small businesses. When tariffs are applied to imported goods, the prices of these products rise, leading to higher living costs for the general public. This impact is especially severe for low and middle-income individuals, who spend a large portion of their income on everyday consumer goods. A prime example of this is when tariffs were imposed on products from China, leading to increased prices for electronics, consumer goods, and food, creating a significant financial burden for lower-income households. One of the groups most directly impacted by political decisions is workers in the service and tourism industries. Hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers are the most vulnerable when international tourist numbers drop, or when tourists reduce spending due to trade and diplomatic policies. Hotel owners. Political decisions, especially those related to travel restrictions or tariffs on tourism services, can lead to a sharp decline in international visitors. Hotel owners in cities reliant on international tourists, particularly from countries affected by tariff wars, may suffer major losses. A drop in the number of visitors forces hotels to lower room prices, cut spending on services, or even lay off staff to maintain operations. Restaurant staff. The restaurant industry also suffers heavily when tourist numbers decline. Policies such as tariffs on imported goods can increase food and service costs, making customers hesitant to spend. Restaurant staff, particularly in small establishments or those located in tourist-heavy areas, may experience reduced working hours or even job loss. This not only impacts their income but also harms the local economy in tourist areas. Taxi drivers. Similarly, taxi drivers and other transport services are impacted when tourist numbers drop. Policies that restrict or limit international travel or increase travel costs may force taxi drivers to face reduced income. These political decisions affect not only taxi drivers, but also related services such as freight transport, tour buses, and other transport industries. Wider economic impact. The effects of political decisions are not confined to specific sectors. They have far-reaching consequences for the U.S. economy. When small businesses such as restaurants, hotels, and transport services are affected, it leads to a decrease in revenue and profits, which in turn impacts their ability to sustain operations and create jobs. Reduced consumer spending also leads to declines in production and distribution in other industries. This can cause a ripple effect, with small businesses cutting staff or reducing production capacity. When people lose jobs or face income reductions, they cut back on their own spending, which reduces demand for products and services in the economy, creating a vicious cycle that affects the entire national economy. While political decisions may benefit large industries, they can have devastating consequences for ordinary citizens, especially those working in the service and tourism sectors. Tariff policies and sanctions may drive up prices and reduce international tourism, significantly affecting the income of hotel owners, restaurant staff, and taxi drivers. This does not only impact these sectors, but can also lead to widespread consequences for the U.S. economy as a whole. It is crucial for political decisions to be carefully considered to ensure that the benefits achieved do not come at the expense of ordinary citizens. The decline in Canadian tourism and the widespread boycott of U.S. products by Canadian citizens is not just a temporary financial issue, but a stark reminder of the long-term consequences of political decisions on the U.S. economy. Canada is not just an important trade partner, but also a long-standing ally of the U.S. When political decisions, such as tariffs or sanctions, cause Canadians to turn away from American products and services, it can create a rift in the trade relationship between these two nations. These changes will not only affect financial figures, but also profoundly impact the long-standing trade relations between the U.S. and Canada. Trust, built over many years between citizens and businesses in both countries, could be shaken if political decisions are not carefully considered. This influence goes beyond just reduced revenues. It also signifies a shift in how cooperation and trade will unfold in the future. If this relationship is not maintained and strengthened, it could lead to a decline in the ability to collaborate over the long term between these two major economies. Small businesses in particular, and industries dependent on international trade, will face difficulties in sustaining growth if there is no consensus or stable cooperation between the U.S. and key trade partners like Canada. Will ordinary Americans continue to pay the price for political decisions made far away in Washington? If you were in Canada's position, would you return to the U.S.? Thank you for watching today's video. As we've seen, the decline in tourism and the boycott from Canada impacts not only the economy, but also the long-term relationship between the two nations. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to leave a like and share this video with your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button to always stay tuned to exciting videos and important stories that affect our lives. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. Thank you so much. In recent years, the dream of traveling to the U.S. has gradually been overshadowed by growing frustration and disappointment from international travelers. While the U.S. used to symbolize adventure, luxury, and opportunity, visitors from Canada, Europe, and Mexico now find exploring all the country has to offer increasingly difficult and expensive. Hidden fees, complicated travel regulations, and cumbersome customs procedures have left many feeling unwelcome. This shift in sentiment has raised eyebrows and sparked intense discussions globally. Join us as we explore the 7 main reasons why international travelers are rethinking their trips to the U.S. and what this means for the country's once thriving tourism industry. Stay tuned. This isn't just about money. It's about the experience and how it's changing in troubling ways. If you agree with these reasons, don't forget to leave a 1 in the comments. If you think otherwise, leave a 0 to let us know your opinion. Be sure to like and subscribe to support our channel. The United States was once the symbol of the American dream, a dream destination for those wanting to explore the world, experience diverse cultures, and seek life-changing opportunities. However, that dream seems to be fading, turning into an uncomfortable reality for many international visitors. From unexpected fees to cumbersome administrative procedures, the transformation in the U.S. tourism industry is a cautionary tale not just for tourists, but also for the country's travel sector. First, let's look at the costs. Traveling to the U.S. is now not only expensive due to publicly disclosed fees, but also because of hidden costs that continue to rise. If you want to fly to the U.S., don't forget that your ticket might come with additional charges for luggage, seat selection, or even meals on the plane. This not only increases the cost of travel, but also frustrates many visitors who feel forced to pay for things that should be basic services. And if you think hotels are where you can relax after a long flight, be prepared for the increasingly steep resort fees. These charges may not be clearly communicated up front, making tourists feel tricked when their final bill turns out to be much higher than expected. In addition, customs procedures are another factor that exhausts travelers when they arrive in the U.S. Complicated regulations and procedures are making tourists' trips more stressful and no longer as easy as before. Long queues, meticulous luggage checks, and strict questioning at the border make many people feel scrutinized, even unwelcome. This particularly affects tourists from Canada, Europe, and Mexico, where relations between the countries have traditionally been good and convenient. In fact, international tourist spending in the U.S. has dropped by 7% this year, a concerning figure for the country's tourism industry. This decline is not only a result of rising costs, but also the effect of the difficult policies and regulations that travelers face. Many tourists from Canada, Europe, and Mexico are turning away from the U.S., choosing other destinations like Asia, Europe, or nearby countries in the region, where travel costs are more reasonable and procedures easier. The reasons for many people turning away from the U.S. can be explained by 7 key factors. First are the hidden fees that travelers face throughout their journey. Next, the complicated customs procedures and security regulations strip away the comfort tourists expect when coming to the U.S. Moreover, with unstable political decisions and changing tax policies, traveling to the U.S. is no longer an attractive option for many. These factors create an unfriendly environment for tourists, making them feel disrespected and unable to enjoy their vacations. A key lesson to be learned from the current state of U.S. tourism is the need to improve tourism policies, from making costs transparent to simplifying customs procedures. If the US wants to maintain its position as one of the world's top tourist destinations, there needs to be a shift in how tourists are treated. This would not only help reduce unreasonable fees, but also create a more welcoming and accessible environment for international visitors. Another lesson is the influence of politics on the tourism industry. Tax policies and legal changes can have a significant impact on tourists' decisions when choosing their destinations. The government must recognize that tourism is not just an economic sector, but an important part of building the national image. A country cannot thrive in tourism if it does not create an easy and comfortable environment for international visitors. The US must understand that in the age of globalization, travelers can choose any country to visit, and if the difficulties in US tourism are not addressed in time, other countries will be ready to seize this market share. Once tourists feel unfairly treated or taken advantage of, they will not hesitate to seek out other destinations where they feel more comfortable and respected. Finally, the changes in the US tourism situation not only reflect a decline in the number of visitors, but also serve as a wake-up call about how a country faces economic and political challenges. The tourism industry is an essential part of a nation's development, and maintaining its appeal to international tourists requires continuous effort to improve the tourism environment while protecting tourists' rights and simplifying administrative processes and policies. What is happening in the US is a lesson for all countries to carefully consider the balance between short-term economic benefits and building a sustainable, friendly, and expanding tourism sector. Traveling to the United States is no longer just a leisurely vacation. It has become a form of short-term consumer debt. In the past, a round-trip flight from Toronto to Florida was as affordable as buying a rice cooker from Walmart. But now, the price of a plane ticket is equivalent to purchasing a flat-screen TV. And that's just the airfare. If you think the cost ends with the plane ticket, you are mistaken. In reality, everything has increased in price, from hotels to dining services, making a vacation in the US no longer a reasonable option for many international tourists. This phenomenon, known as price shock, is a jarring increase in costs that directly impacts travelers' wallets. Price shock is not only about sudden price hikes, but also the lack of transparency in the additional fees that tourists are expected to pay. Many travelers have complained that they were overcharged at popular tourist destinations. Resort fees, service charges, parking fees, and hidden consumption costs increase the overall price of a trip to the US, making tourism less appealing than ever before. According to a recent report by the World Travel and Tourism Council, international tourist spending in the US is expected to decrease by 7% in 2025, equivalent to a loss of around $2.5 billion. While these numbers may seem abstract, they reflect a worrying reality for the US tourism industry. The effects of this decline are not limited to large travel companies, but also extend to millions of workers in the service sector. From bartenders at Las Vegas casinos to tour guides in New York and employees in the hospitality industry, all are facing a significant loss in income. Around 100,000 jobs in the service sector could be lost, creating a shock to the local economies of many major cities across the US. The US tourism industry, once one of the largest revenue generators for the country, now faces severe challenges. As travel costs become prohibitive, many international tourists will opt for other destinations where they can get better value for their money. This will not only harm tourism businesses, but also affect the workers in cities that rely on international tourism to sustain their economies. The impact of rising costs goes beyond the tourists themselves and affects the image of the US as an attractive tourist destination. In today's globalized world, travelers have more choices than ever before. And when factors such as high costs, complex procedures, and hidden fees continue to rise, it will be difficult for the US to maintain its position in the hearts of international tourists. Other countries with lower costs and easier procedures will become more appealing alternatives. The lesson here is clear. If the US doesn't quickly adjust its pricing policies and administrative procedures, the tourism industry will face a difficult future. International tourists will no longer choose the US if they feel taken advantage of by unreasonable fees and cumbersome processes. To maintain its attractiveness, the US needs to reduce hidden costs, clarify fees up front, and improve the travel experience for tourists. This will not only help the tourism economy grow, but also protect the service industries that are struggling with the downturn. The U.S. must recognize that tourism is not only an important economic sector, but also a key part of its national image-building strategy. Tourism not only drives economic growth, but also serves as a powerful tool for promoting culture, creating jobs, and attracting investment. Therefore, if pricing policies do not change, the U.S. tourism industry may lose its competitiveness and fail to attract international tourists in the future. As travel costs to the United States continue to rise, many international tourists, especially from Canada, are beginning to feel the financial burden. A recent report reveals that, in just a few months, bookings from Canada to the U.S. have dropped by more than 35%. This shift not only reflects a change in travel preferences, but also a significant shift in the purchasing power of tourists. So why are tourists choosing to leave the U.S. and head to other destinations? Simply put, everything is adding up. A flight from Canada to the U.S. is no longer just expensive due to the ticket price, but also due to the numerous additional fees. Luggage fees, seat selection charges, and especially hotel service fees, even at a budget motel, significantly raise the overall cost of the trip. Even something as simple as a meal can cost an additional 20% in tips, not because the tourists are particularly generous, but because it's automatically added to the bill. Given this situation, U.S. tourism is gradually becoming an unappealing option for many travelers, especially those from countries with lower living standards like Canada. For example, a person living in Toronto who used to drive to Florida every winter to escape the harsh cold had to cancel their trip this year simply because of the high costs. When they tried to book tickets for their family of 4, the total cost increased by $600 due to hidden fees and taxes they were unaware of. As a result, they chose Cuba as an alternative destination, where the costs were much lower and they could still enjoy their vacation. In fact, a one-week all-inclusive vacation in Varadero, Cuba, is now cheaper than a weekend getaway in Miami. This clearly illustrates the cost disparity between the U.S. and other destinations, especially when tourists now have many alternative options. Cuba, with its affordable prices and no hidden fees, has become an attractive destination, even for families that were accustomed to visiting the U.S. As the cost of U.S. travel continues to climb, many tourists are turning away from the country and seeking more reasonably priced destinations. These changes not only affect tourists, but also directly impact the local economy in the U.S., particularly in large cities that rely heavily on international tourism. Local businesses, from restaurants to hotels, will face significant declines in revenue. Those working in the service industry, who depend on international tourists, will bear the brunt of the damage. The key lesson here is that the U.S. tourism industry needs to adjust its pricing policies and taxes to retain tourists. If not, many travelers will continue to search for more affordable destinations, which will severely damage the U.S. tourism economy. The government and U.S. tourism businesses need to reconsider hidden fees and find ways to simplify administrative procedures while offering more transparent and reasonable travel options for international tourists. Moreover, this lesson serves as a reminder for other countries about the importance of maintaining reasonable costs in the tourism industry. Travel policies should carefully balance economic benefits with the comfort of tourists. While increasing hidden fees and taxes may bring short-term revenue, in the long run, it will diminish the appeal of a country like the U.S. in the eyes of international travelers. Remember, in a competitive world, tourists can easily find other destinations that are more affordable and offer a more enjoyable experience. The United States, once the bustling consumer paradise where supermarkets are always lit, stores open 24/7, and Las Vegas never sleeps, has long been a dream destination for tourists worldwide. However, that image is gradually changing, and the current reality brings with it a bitter truth. This paradise no longer attracts international tourists as it once did, as they begin to opt for destinations with more reasonable costs and fewer hassles. As European tourists start heading to Turkey, Mexicans look for vacations in Japan or Spain, and Canadians choose direct flights to Caribbean destinations. The U.S. is no longer the only appealing destination. Factors such as high costs, Complicated administrative procedures and stringent security regulations have made many tourists feel unwelcome, prompting them to find better alternatives in other countries. The bitterest truth is that even ordinary Americans are facing rising costs. With the decline in international tourists, hotels and restaurants in major cities must compensate for this shortfall by raising their service prices. This creates a vicious cycle. When international tourists don't come, locals end up shouldering higher costs to keep the tourism industry and related services running. As a result, domestic travel is now as expensive as buying a used car. Domestic flights are no longer as cheap as they once were, and additional services, from luggage to meals, have surged in price. Each trip to the airport feels like a gamble. Will the flight be delayed? How much will baggage fees add to the cost? Will the fast food meal from the airport vendor actually be enough to fill you up? Or will it be just a sandwich that leaves you still hungry? This reality is a direct consequence of the increasingly strict political policies and security controls in place in the U.S. While security checks at airports are necessary to ensure national safety, they cause inconvenience and lengthen the waiting time for travelers. These procedures not only create stress for tourists, but also contribute to the rising costs of trips, from additional luggage fees to other service charges that were once unthinkable. Moreover, the U.S. tax policies and travel regulations are also contributing to the country's decreasing competitiveness on the global tourism map. Other countries, such as Turkey, Japan, and Caribbean destinations, have adapted to meet tourists' needs and adjusted their policies to keep visitors coming. In contrast, the U.S. has not made significant changes to revitalize its tourism industry. The lesson here is clear. If the U.S. does not change its approach to the tourism industry, not only will international tourists turn away, but even American citizens may also abandon domestic travel. The government needs to reassess tax policies, reduce administrative procedures, and create a more welcoming environment for tourists. The U.S. must make tourism an attractive and accessible choice again, not just to draw international tourists, but also to serve the domestic travel needs of its own citizens. Additionally, improving the experience at airports and tourist destinations is crucial. Airports need to reduce waiting times and eliminate unreasonable fees. Without these changes, the U.S. will face a bleak tourism future, with both tourists and locals enduring high prices and frustrating administrative procedures. One of the main concerns for international visitors to the United States is the stressful experience at border checkpoints, where travelers not only face hidden fees, but also rigorous immigration procedures that strip away their sense of security. In fact, many people feel like they are participating in a game show when stepping into U.S. airports. A friend of mine once said half-jokingly, "Going to the U.S. now feels like entering a game show. The rules are simple. You walk into the airport, go through customs, and hope you guess the right question. The prize is a passport stamp. If you fail, you might wait for hours or even days in the waiting area without any consolation prize." While this may sound humorous, the reality is very serious. Nowadays, many international visitors report that entering the U.S. is no longer a simple task, but rather a nerve-wracking experience. Every traveler faces intense questioning from customs officers, where everything from phones and laptops to social media accounts is thoroughly scrutinized. Numerous travelers have shared how they feel monitored and investigated without knowing why, simply because they are entering the country. The situation becomes even more serious when certain countries, particularly European ones, face changes in U.S. entry regulations. Travelers from these countries, who once used the STA, Electronic System for Travel Authorization, for quick and convenient entry, are now stripped of this privilege and must apply for a full visa through a far more complicated process. For example, travelers from Europe to Cuba can no longer use ESTA and must undergo the lengthy visa process, which requires significant time and effort. This heightened tension not only annoys travelers, but also damages the U.S.'s image as a friendly, accessible, and open destination for international visitors. When a country enforces excessive security measures that make tourists feel like potential criminals, it creates an invisible barrier between travelers and the U.S., making them reconsider their decision to visit. The worrying aspect is that these security regulations and immigration procedures are becoming more complex and strict, while international tourists are increasingly seeking destinations that are easier and more welcoming. Countries like those in the European Union, Japan, and Latin America have made reforms to simplify entry procedures and reduce excessive controls. This has made these countries more attractive to international tourists, especially when they can easily access them without facing long delays and cumbersome procedures. The lesson here is clear. The U.S. needs to reassess its security measures and immigration procedures. While security is crucial to ensuring the safety of the nation, if regulations and procedures make tourists feel unwelcome and violate their privacy, they will undoubtedly have a negative impact on the tourism industry and the U.S. economy. The U.S. needs to strike a balance between national security and creating a friendly, convenient environment for international visitors. A more open entry policy with a simple and fast process will not only help the U.S. attract international tourists, but also enhance its national image, making tourists feel at ease when choosing the U.S. as their vacation destination. When international tourists stop visiting the U.S., the effects extend beyond just tourism businesses, spreading throughout the economy and directly affecting local communities. One of the most noticeable consequences is that hotels and restaurants are forced to raise prices to compensate for the loss of international visitors. However, it is the everyday Americans who bear the full weight of these wall-building fees. Without international tourists, these businesses try to maintain their profits by increasing costs, and naturally, domestic consumers are the ones who pay. Ordinary workers and families will feel the price hikes in their daily services, from dining out at restaurants to staying in hotels, from short vacations to business trips. It's like a vicious cycle. When international visitors no longer come, this revenue shortfall is placed on the shoulders of local residents, driving up the cost of living while the quality of services declines. It's not just about the cost. When international visitors are absent, major cities will see a drop in tourism-related revenue. This is a crucial income stream not only for the service industries, but also for the budgets of cities and states. Tourism tax revenue helps improve infrastructure, maintain public services, and fund community development projects. When this revenue is cut, cities will face budget shortfalls, leading to cuts in infrastructure spending and public services. The consequence is that not only will tourists suffer, but local residents will also experience reduced service quality and higher costs. Cities may have to scale back public services like public transportation, cultural and entertainment activities, or even the maintenance of public facilities. This not only impacts the quality of life for residents, but also reduces the city's appeal to both international tourists and its own population. Moreover, the decline in tourism also results in the loss of an important source of employment for millions of workers. Workers in the restaurant, hotel, tourism, and transportation industries will face unemployment or reduced wages as businesses scale back operations. This creates a cycle of poverty, where workers have unstable incomes and limited spending power, which further impacts small businesses in the community. The lesson here from the decline in tourism is the importance of maintaining a welcoming and attractive environment for international tourists. Without improvements in tourism policies and a reduction in barriers for visitors, the U.S. will continue to see a decrease in tourism revenue, which will severely affect local communities, the economy, and the quality of life for residents. The U.S. needs to act quickly to restore and sustain the tourism industry as a cornerstone of the economy, not only to serve international visitors, but also to protect the interests of local citizens and communities. The United States is not only facing a decline in international visitors, but this issue has far-reaching effects that directly impact the economy and the lives of its citizens. Tourists from Mexico, who once frequently visited the U.S., are among those suffering as they face barriers due to policies and entry procedures. But it is not just them who pay the price. We, the everyday Americans, are the ones who ultimately bear the brunt of this decline. When the tourism industry loses international guests, the service sector and other industries dependent on tourism also face crisis. Job losses, rising prices, and declining service quality are all contributing to a negative cycle that, in the end, local residents must shoulder. Communities in major cities will face budget cuts for infrastructure, public services, and employment. This not only affects local citizens, but also diminishes the US's appeal in the eyes of international tourists. We are not only losing tourists, but we are also losing the competitiveness and attractiveness of a country that was once a global leader in tourism. If nothing changes, the US will continue to fall behind, while other countries will continue to grow and thrive due to their more welcoming and tourist-friendly policies. The call to action is clear. The government and relevant agencies need to reform tourism policies, reduce bureaucratic procedures, simplify entry processes, and reconsider the hidden fees that both tourists and locals are burdened with. This is not only necessary to restore the tourism industry, but also to protect the economy and ensure that ordinary Americans do not pay the price for the loss of tourism revenue. Leave a comment below this video. What do you think about the current state of tourism in the US? Are these changes a sign of a major shift in the future? We would love to hear your thoughts. Florida, a state renowned for its sunshine and stunning beaches, is now witnessing an incredible shift. One of the state's most loyal groups of visitors, Canadians, is slowly pulling back, and this change is not just a temporary slowdown. It's a powerful, quiet, yet decisive withdrawal. Bookings are plummeting. Real estate is being sold at an unprecedented rate, and for the first time in many years, these visitors are saying, "We're done." Is this just a simple financial issue, or is it a reflection of a sense of being abandoned and unwelcome? With over $6 billion once spent annually in Florida, that money is now flowing into other destinations like Portugal, Mexico, and the Caribbean. And the Florida economy is beginning to face the clear consequences. Florida, once hailed as the paradise for seasonal migrants, is now facing a major shift it couldn't have predicted. If 2025 has witnessed this decline, 2026 may be even worse. The quiet boycott of Canadian visitors, who have been loyal to the state for decades, is underway and spreading. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like and subscribe so that this video reaches those who need to hear it. Every year, as fall begins and the leaves change color in Ontario and Quebec, thousands of Canadian retirees embark on their slow migration south. They are not just tourists. They are seasonal migrants, some staying for a few weeks, others for half a year. They have built routines, friendships, and traditions that have lasted decades. A couple from Montreal shared, "We've spent over 25 winters there. Every December, we pack up, drive down to Florida, and reunite with old friends at the same restaurant. It's our second home." But now that ritual is slowly unraveling. More and more longtime migrants are leaving, not because they want to, but because they feel forced to do so. A woman from Vancouver shared that the atmosphere in Florida has changed. It's not just about the cost, but also about politics and the feeling of no longer being welcome. Some people have begun selling their homes in Florida, while others don't even want to return. A family from Ottawa, after 17 winters in Naples, decided to sell everything. For them, 2025 wasn't just a missed year. It was a bittersweet goodbye. This change comes at a steep price. In Florida alone, Canadians have spent over $6.6 billion annually on housing, groceries, dining, and entertainment. But now, that money is no longer flowing into Florida. Instead, it's heading to Canada, Portugal, Mexico, and the Caribbean. What was once a seasonal tradition is now slowly becoming a closed chapter, and Florida, whether it recognizes it or not, is beginning to face the consequences. The reason is not just about money or rising premiums. It's something deeper, an attitude shift. For years, Canadians were treated like family in Florida, but now that warmth has given way to mockery and disdain. Canadian leaders are ridiculed, their role diminished. Trump has once again become the focus of criticism, calling Canada a nasty and unpleasant neighbor. Governor DeSantis pays little attention to the concerns of seasonal Canadian migrants. And for many, that's the final straw. A couple from Nova Scotia said, "We've lived in Florida for many years, and now we feel like we're no longer welcome. After the cruel jokes, the insults, and the smug attitude, we had no choice but to turn our backs and leave." But we are not alone. Online communities are also filled with the same quiet frustration. It's not just about the costs. It's also about how we are perceived. It's as if we are a nuisance, not valued guests. A former visitor from Winnipeg openly shared that Florida thinks it can manage just fine without our help. Now, the parking lots are eerily empty. Restaurants are thinning out. On travel forums, real estate listings, and local business pages, the message couldn't be clearer. Canadians haven't just been pushed out, they've been pushed aside. What stands out most in this change is the striking silence. No noisy protests, no trending hashtags, no big announcements from Ottawa. It's simply a slow, unceremonious withdrawal. Booking rates are steadily declining. Flights are emptier. Florida real estate is still vacant. At first, many thought this was just a temporary adjustment after the pandemic, a tough season, but things haven't recovered. A retired couple from Quebec shared, "We don't really mind leaving. We just aren't coming back, and most of our friends feel the same." Everything is quiet, but deeply felt. This is a silent protest, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Exhausted from being ridiculed, from feeling like second-class guests in a place they once called their winter home. And what's notable is that this protest comes with no demands. It's simply a decision. A decision to leave and not return. "We found an apartment in Portugal, cheaper and more respectful," one Canadian shared. "No hassle, just peace." At first, Florida didn't notice, but now the change has become unmistakable. The patios are empty, bookings are slower, and the highways are quieter. What they thought was a mere lull is now beginning to feel permanent. So what's the message behind all of this? You didn't lose us because of taxes. You lost us because you stopped listening. At first, Florida ignored it, and local officials downplayed the importance of this change. Real estate agents called it a market cool-down, and Governor DeSantis barely acknowledged it, saying Florida's economy is strong enough to stand on its own. But the numbers tell a different story. We're talking about billions of dollars in lost revenue from real estate, restaurants, car rentals, entertainment, and even healthcare services. A couple from Ontario told CBC that they used to spend over $25,000 every winter on everything from local contractors to haircuts. But now, that money is going to Portugal. When you multiply the financial losses with tens of thousands of households, the damage becomes incalculable. Cities like Naples, Sarasota, and Fort Lauderdale are facing immense pressure. Off-season businesses are struggling, rental properties remain empty, and seasonal workers like cleaners, servers, and tour guides are facing reduced hours or even being laid off entirely. And here's the real irony. Some Americans are celebrating the departure of winter migrants, thinking it will reduce traffic and lower home prices. But the reality is quite the opposite. As the number of tourists drops, many small businesses can't survive. Prices aren't going down, they're going up, and some businesses have even been forced to close. Florida's winter economy cannot rely on weekend tourists. It was built on steady, reliable winter residents, many of whom were Canadians. Now, in 2025, cracks have appeared in places no one expected. A construction worker in Lee County stated, "Winter used to be the busiest season, but now we're working slower or even not completing the jobs." The issue isn't just the loss of tourists, it's the loss of residents. Seasonal Canadian migrants aren't short-term tourists. They are part-time Floridians, and their absence leaves more than empty chairs in beachside cafes. It leaves a gap in the economy that Florida never anticipated and still hasn't fully acknowledged. But Florida is not the only place feeling this loss. Across the U.S., the quiet decline of the Canadian community is reshaping both the tourism and real estate markets. In Houston, Canadian interest in real estate has dropped by 55%. Philadelphia is down 53%. Chicago has seen a 47% decrease in searches from Canadians. And these aren't just numbers. They reflect something deeper. Not just a market shift, but a change in feelings, in preferences. The issue is no longer just about real estate. It's about perception. Cities that were once prime destinations for winter tourists are now seeing vacant rental properties, fewer bookings, and emptier airports. Even Arizona, long considered a winter tourist haven, is reporting a significant drop in seasonal residents this year. In states like Nevada and New York, travel platforms are seeing a sharp decline in Canadian visitors. It's not just about bookings, but also basic searches. In some areas, Canadians aren't being replaced by other tourists. The rooms are just sitting empty. This isn't a noisy boycott, but a gradual weakening. A change that can't be ignored. A growing silence is spreading, causing restaurants, beaches, and winter towns to struggle to adapt. Meanwhile, countries like Spain, Costa Rica, and the Caribbean are welcoming more Canadians than ever before. The winter routines that were once stable in Florida are now being replaced by new destinations, where the prices are more affordable and the respect is greater. Florida may be bearing the brunt of the consequences, but the message it sends is echoing across the United States. You might have thought that we would always recover, but this time, it's different. The numbers we're seeing in 2025 aren't just a warning. They could be a preview of what's to come. This is no longer just a story about the winter housing market or real estate listings. This is a revolution in the entire landscape of tourism and migration. The travel mindset of Canadians toward the United States has been deeply affected and shows no signs of recovering. For 6 consecutive months, travel from Canada has dropped by double digits. Surveys show that over 70% of Canadians either have no plans to visit the US or have canceled their trips. This change doesn't just affect seasonal migrants. It affects family trips, road trips, vacation bookings, spontaneous getaways, and the entire cross-border movement. And this time, unlike previous slow tourist seasons that could be quickly recovered, this one feels different. Canadians aren't just resting, they're rethinking their entire relationship with the US. What was once natural, spending a winter in Florida, a cross-border shopping trip, a holiday under the sun, is now gradually being replaced by Spain, Mexico, or anywhere other than the US. And if 2025 has been like this, 2026 could be much worse. What we're witnessing now is not just a seasonal decline. It's a fundamental change in how Canadians perceive and interact with the US. Once trust is broken, that connection will never be the same. Sometimes it may never return. Florida may still have sunshine, but the warmth is slowly fading. What we're seeing from Canadians is not just a pause, it's a major shift. And unless there's a real change, this shift could become permanent. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps us spread this important message. And if you've ever been a seasonal migrant or have chosen to leave, feel free to leave a comment below. Your story could be featured in our next video. Have you ever noticed the shockwaves shaking up the US tourism industry in 2021? 8 major American brands, once considered strong symbols of success, are now teetering on the edge of losing billions in revenue. What could be causing these once unstoppable names to fail on their own home turf? It's not economic downturns or pandemics. It's soaring prices, security concerns, and visa barriers. While once bustling shopping streets are now eerily quiet and casinos that were once packed with players around the world now stand still. 5 countries are quietly celebrating as they welcome the very tourists who used to flock to the US. You might be able to guess some of these brands, but a few will undoubtedly surprise you. If you skip the final part of this video, you'll miss the most crucial clue about new travel mandates quietly taking shape. The bigger question here is, how will this trend reshape the US tourism industry and the job market? And don't forget, now you can walk right into Disney without waiting in line. But the reason isn't because you have a priority pass or know someone at the gate. This huge shift is happening right before our eyes. As President Donald Trump once said, "We need to make America great again, and a big part of that is keeping our strength in the tourism industry." So what do you think about this trend? How do you think these changes will reshape America's tourism industry? The reality is, no one has to wait anymore. 10 years ago, a trip to Disney was the highlight of the year for thousands of families. But now, many have completely missed out on that experience. And this isn't just gossip. Online videos constantly show that Disney parks are eerily empty, to the point where Disney characters have to run out and personally invite guests to join in the fun. International visitors to Disney have dropped over 20% since 2019, while the cost of a single-day ticket has now reached $150, not including food or souvenirs. Sometimes you could spend that same amount on a Lego set and even sign up for a month of Netflix. But price isn't the only reason why tourists are turning away. Many visitors have shared, "I went to Disney once, came back, and nothing had changed. It was just way more expensive." Meanwhile, Disney Tokyo continues to roll out new attractions, and Disney Shanghai has even transformed the entire park into a Broadway-style spectacle under the open sky. Surprisingly, even Americans are now willing to fly halfway across the world to experience these parks. What's shocking is that the ticket prices aren't cheaper, but everyone agrees it's worth every penny. With the same budget, families can enjoy a foreign vacation, experience a fresh take on Disney, and show off their travels to friends and family. This year, we went to Japan. This is the biggest problem Disney faces today. Not just losing visitors to the parks, but also losing customers to destinations outside of the US. If you're from the generation that took your kids to Disney in the 80s and 90s, you'll feel the change. A once shining icon is now slowly fading like an old tree in the garden. Still standing, but its green leaves are thinning. So, what about you? If you had $5,000 for a family vacation, would you choose Disney World in Florida or Disney Sea in Tokyo? Your answer may reveal more about your priorities in life than you think. Do you remember the legendary slogan of Las Vegas? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. However, what's happening now is that what happens in Vegas is no longer staying there. The truth is, customers are slowly but surely leaving this iconic city. If you don't believe it, take a moment to watch this video. The once bustling entertainment spots are now so quiet that you could run through them without bumping into anyone. Just a few years ago, Las Vegas was still considered the entertainment capital of the world. The casinos were brightly lit with neon lights, and there were long lines of people waiting day and night to watch spectacular shows by stars like Celine Dion. Fremont Street, known for its lively music performances, was always filled with tourists. But today, according to the latest reports, MGM Resorts casino revenue has dropped by over 15% since 2019. The number of international visitors has fallen so dramatically that some casinos have had to close during the week, something that never happened before. People often blame the prices. Hotel rooms skyrocketing, expensive tickets for premium shows, and service fees that seem to increase every year. But that's not the full story. The bigger problem is that Las Vegas is no longer the only option for those seeking entertainment experiences. Cities like Macau, Singapore, and Dubai have built even more modern and luxurious resorts. And, more importantly, they don't charge $8 for a bottle of water like Vegas does. Here's an interesting statistic. Macau is now attracting double the number of high-end tourists as Las Vegas, and many of them are Americans. They fly halfway around the world just to find something different in life. But they're willing to spend big bucks on these far-flung resorts while Las Vegas struggles to bring them back. Of course, MGM isn't sitting idly by. They've started experimenting with non-gambling experiences, from high-end dining events to international concerts and full wellness services, all aimed at attracting families and younger generations. After all, not everyone who visits Vegas is there for a blackjack table or a deck of cards. But there are many who are willing to pay for experiences that make them feel special and different. Could this be the way to restore Vegas's former charm? A place that once had people fighting to get in the doors of its casinos? Imagine a Vegas that isn't just about gambling, but also a hub for culture, entertainment, and wellness. A Vegas where families can find their own joy, where young people can experience a refreshing lifestyle without worrying about sky-high costs. And above all, Vegas will no longer just be a place you visit to play. It will be a place you go to live, to enjoy, and to feel the transformation every single day. Today, you can easily move around stores, even dance the tango down the aisles without bumping into anyone. Remember the golden days when Macy's and Bloomingdale's were must-visit destinations for international tourists coming to the U.S. Shopping there wasn't just about spending money. It was an emotional experience. The annual holiday sales, the suitcase full of gifts, and then going home to tell friends all about it. All of these created unforgettable memories for shopping enthusiasts. However, things are changing. According to retail industry reports, revenue from shopping by tourists has decreased by as much as 25% in recent years. The main reason is the significant drop in international visitors coming to the U.S. Shopping habits have shifted, and instead of rushing into bustling shopping malls, tourists are now seeking cultural experiences, exploring unique cuisines, or engaging in outdoor activities to better understand the local culture. Many tourists have realized that goods in the U.S. are no longer cheaper than elsewhere. In fact, in some cases, products in the U.S. are much more expensive than in Europe or Asia. Additionally, high sales taxes, oversized luggage fees, and other additional costs make shopping at malls far less attractive. A woman from Toronto shared her story. "I used to go to New York every year just to shop at Macy's. Back then, I always came home with at least 3 suitcases full of amazing items. But now, I feel lucky if I can just buy a small silk scarf for my granddaughter. Everything I need is available in Canada, and many of the things I've bought were cheaper when I was in Italy last year." Her story isn't just a personal experience, but reflects the mindset of millions of other customers. People who once saw shopping in the U.S. as a joy, but are now looking for alternatives. This reality is not just a change in shopping habits, but a shift in how tourists experience the U.S. Shopping is no longer the main attraction. Instead, they are seeking unique experiences, exploring new cultures, and enjoying memorable moments at restaurants, cafes, or places that aren't found in traditional travel guides. This not only reflects a change in tourists' needs, but also presents a major shock to the U.S. retail economy, which once built its global reputation on unforgettable shopping trips. So the big question is, can the U.S. recover its retail industry? Or will we witness a major transformation, where new experiences become the primary consumer trend, replacing the image of traditional shopping malls? Hilton Hotels and Resorts, once a symbol of luxury and prestige, is facing a concerning reality that few could have predicted. Previously seen as the pinnacle of sophistication and beloved by travelers from around the world, Hilton is now witnessing an increasing number of vacant rooms, even during Florida's peak tourist season. A housekeeping staff member at a Hilton hotel in Florida shared that last summer. She almost had to work overtime every week, but this year, her schedule has been cut down to only 3 days a week. This isn't just coincidental. The number of international guests at Hilton has significantly decreased. There are weeks when the hotel has only a few rooms available. She mentioned that she has never seen Hilton so empty. According to STR, Hilton's occupancy rate at popular tourist spots in the U.S. has dropped by as much as 15% compared to pre-pandemic times, despite a strong recovery in domestic tourism. So why are customers abandoning Hilton? The reasons are not hard to spot. Hotel room rates at Hilton properties have increased by about 25% compared to previous years, and on top of that, many additional service fees have made tourists start seeking more affordable and convenient alternatives. Interestingly, it's not just international guests. Even Americans are gradually shifting to smaller boutique hotels or services like Airbnb in Europe and Asia. These options are not only more affordable, but they also offer travelers unique local experiences. In fact, many loyal Hilton customers admit that they are willing to fly to Portugal or Spain, stay at a similar hotel for just 70% of the price in the U.S., and enjoy breathtaking scenery and new cultural experiences. To meet this demand, Hilton has started making significant investments in all-inclusive packages, including accommodation, dining, and entertainment, hoping to compete with international resorts. Additionally, Hilton is experimenting with AI-driven personalized services to enhance convenience and draw loyal customers back. These services promise to provide a highly customized shopping and vacation experience, making customers feel like an important part of Hilton's service ecosystem. Could this be the key for Hilton to regain its global appeal and rise above this crisis? A world-class tech conference that used to be held in New York has now moved to Lisbon, simply because organizing it is cheaper and more convenient there. It may sound unbelievable, but with the swift and surprising changes in the tourism and service industry, this risk is no longer a distant prospect. Will Hilton and other giants in the tourism industry find new ways to regain their position, or will they remain overshadowed by the changing global market? The answer will undoubtedly have a profound impact on the future of the travel and leisure industry. Think back to Marriott's glory days, when they were the undisputed king of the meetings and events industry, and you'll remember the gilded ballrooms in Washington, D.C., the stunning resorts in Hawaii, and the world-class service Marriott provided. For CEOs, politicians, and multi-million-dollar events, Marriott was the go-to destination. But the undeniable truth is that the market has changed, and Marriott is facing a major challenge that they can't ignore. According to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, international conference bookings in the United States have dropped nearly 30% over the past year. And unfortunately, Marriott is one of the brands that has been hit the hardest. What's causing this king to stumble? The answer is cost. It's that simple. Conference room rates in the United States are now 35% higher than in Europe. In addition, hidden service fees and rising catering costs make holding a conference in the US too expensive, making many partners nervous and no longer interested in options here. And it's not just a matter of cost. International companies and even some American companies have started looking for conference locations outside the US. Why? Because holding a conference in famous European cities is now not only cost-effective, but also provides a memorable experience for employees. Instead of holding a conference in New York, many companies are now choosing Barcelona as their destination, with strategy meetings in the morning and relaxing afternoons watching the Mediterranean sunset. Just look at the numbers and you will see the difference. A 3-day conference package in Lisbon costs just $500 per person, a savings of $400,000 or $1,000 compared to hosting a similar event in Chicago, including international airfare. Such a stark difference has Marriott in the US worried as its conference bookings are down while its European locations are soaring. But will Marriott sit back and let customers go? Of course not. It has plans to invest heavily in hybrid meeting technology, combining online and in-person experiences to deliver convenience and retain customers. What's more, Marriott is working to upgrade its conference packages, adding cultural and culinary experiences to enrich the customer journey. With the right strategy, Marriott can still reclaim a valuable portion of its market and continue to be a go-to destination for those looking for more than just work, but also experiences. What about you? If your company needs to host a conference, would you choose Midtown New York with its high costs and the buzz of a big city, or a European coastal city where you can combine work with great relaxation, explore new cultures, and enjoy great scenery? Your answer may reflect part of a larger shift in the travel and events industry, where it is not just about work, but also about life experiences. If major hotel chains are facing a loss of customers due to shifting travel trends, the question is, what about the airline industry? The industry, which relies heavily on business and leisure travel, is also experiencing major changes. Routes that were once familiar, carrying millions of passengers each year to popular destinations, are disappearing. Flights from New York to Honolulu, Los Angeles to Orlando, and transatlantic routes from Boston to Paris were all staples of American travelers' itineraries. But now, they are becoming distant memories. According to data from OAG, more than a dozen long-haul international and domestic routes on American Airlines and Delta have been cut back sharply in the past year due to a significant drop in passengers. It's not just a lack of customers, it's a change in American travel habits. Today, customers are increasingly turning to international low-cost carriers, willing to accept longer layovers to save a few $100s per ticket. The convenience of direct flights is becoming less attractive when compared to the cheaper fares offered by international airlines, and this is forcing major airlines to rethink their strategies. A clear example is the London to Orlando route. Once a legendary route, with European tourists flocking to Disney every year. However, the route has now been discontinued, with European tourists heading to Disney parks in Tokyo and Paris instead of the US. Even more heartbreaking is that before the COVID-19 pandemic, the New York to Honolulu route used to be at 92% capacity during peak season. But this year, that figure has dropped to below 70%, forcing airlines to reduce frequencies and raise fares to cover losses. This has led to many passengers switching to other airlines to save money. This is even more remarkable when we look at a strange trend. Americans are now choosing to fly Qatar Airways to Europe and then connecting to Hawaii because the total cost is even lower than a direct flight from the US. Passengers can save hundreds of dollars, and instead of expensive flights on US airlines, they choose convenient and affordable connecting flights on international airlines. To retain customers, American Airlines and Delta have begun experimenting with resort-based flight packages, offering personalized flight experiences with innovative services. But will a fancy meal or free Wi-Fi be enough to save the day? Maintaining their iconic routes will require more than just improving services. To cope with increasing competition from international airlines, major US airlines will have to come up with more creative ways to attract customers back, from improving service to creating unique and memorable flight experiences. So, if it were you, would you choose an expensive non-stop flight on a US airline or a cost-effective connecting flight on an international airline? And if even established airlines like American Airlines and Delta are struggling to retain customers, how much longer will the cruise industry, considered a vacation paradise for many, survive? As travel trends change rapidly, Americans' choice of vacation type will be influenced not only by price, but also by the unique experience each type of travel brings. Stay tuned. When many Americans think of luxury cruises, they immediately picture the giant ships of Carnival Cruise Line or Royal Caribbean sailing from Miami, the ultimate destination for luxury, sun, wind, and waves. Cruise ships with infinity pools, 24/7 buffets, non-stop entertainment, and long days of enjoying the Caribbean sunshine were once the pinnacle of vacation travel. However, the current story is far from what we imagined. According to a report by CLIA, Cruise Line International Association, the number of cruise ships departing from US ports has decreased by more than 18% compared to 2019. Meanwhile, the number of ships departing from Europe and the Caribbean has increased by nearly 25% over the same period. This reversal raises a big question. Is America's cruise paradise losing its appeal? And the answer is not so hard to guess. Price is the biggest barrier. The cost of a cruise departing from the US has increased dramatically. Port fees are getting higher, and even domestic flights to departure ports are skyrocketing. This has caused many travelers, especially retired Americans, to start looking at other options. For the same budget, they realize that they can fly to Europe, take a Mediterranean cruise, visit Italy, France, and Greece, all beautiful countries, instead of just hanging around the Caribbean. A clear example is a 7-day cruise from Miami to the Bahamas, which costs about $1,200 per person. However, for just $150 more, you can board a Royal Caribbean cruise departing from Barcelona and visit 3 wonderful countries, Italy, France, and Greece, in one itinerary. This has completely changed the perspective of many customers. A trip to the Caribbean may still be appealing, but the Mediterranean is truly unmissable. So Carnival and Royal Caribbean are planning to expand their international cruise lines and upgrade their port experiences. They're looking to add exclusive anchorages, local cultural tours, and partner with celebrity chefs to create unique dining experiences for their guests. These changes are meant to differentiate themselves and hopefully return US cruises to their former glory. So if you had 7 days off, would you choose a familiar Caribbean cruise departing from Miami? Or would you fly to Barcelona and enjoy a Mediterranean cruise, experiencing 3 countries in one trip? It's not just about choosing between 2 destinations. It's about how we view and experience travel. Are you willing to change your perspective to have a more memorable vacation, even if it means crossing an ocean? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Who would have thought that one day the iconic casinos of Atlantic City, once symbols of luxury, prosperity, and pride of the American entertainment industry, would have to be put up for sale? Caesars Entertainment, one of the largest and most prestigious casino corporations in the world, behind a series of famous casinos from Las Vegas to New Orleans, was once a dream destination for the elite and tourists looking for bright lights and lavish parties. But today, the story of Caesars is gradually changing. In recent years, the sharp decline in international visitors is pushing many famous brands into difficult situations. Revenue from international visitors is down more than 20%. Hotel bookings are also constantly decreasing. This is a big shock for a brand that was once a symbol of the American casino industry. Similar to MGM Resorts, Caesars Entertainment is facing fierce competition from more developed international markets. Destinations like Singapore, Macau, and Monte Carlo have become more attractive options for the elite, where guests can not only gamble but also experience personalized service, complimentary suites, and multi-million-dollar promotions in a single night. It is the rising costs of services combined with competition from overseas markets that have forced Caesars to cut staff, close some tables at major casinos, and reduce the number of shows to save costs. But the biggest shock is yet to come. According to reputable sources in the industry, a portion of Caesars Entertainment's assets, its prestigious hotels and casinos, are now in negotiations to be sold to foreign investors. It would be the first time that part of the U.S. casino empire has fallen into foreign hands, a worrying sign of change in the industry. Ironically, Las Vegas, which once proudly declared itself the casino capital of the world, now faces an uncertain future. It may have to continue expanding, at least until its entire casino empire is sold. To retain its appeal, Caesars Entertainment is experimenting with a new model, the multi-entertainment model. Going beyond gambling, Caesars is incorporating a variety of entertainment, from concerts to sporting events to fine dining, all in an effort to attract a new group of customers who come here for more than just gambling. The biggest question, however, remains: will these changes be enough to preserve the soul of the American casino industry, which has long been an irreplaceable symbol of the country? Can the multi-entertainment model sustain and even bring Caesars back to its former glory? And if you are a tourist, would you still want to go to Las Vegas, where there is now more than just gambling, but also a mix of different experiences? Would you continue to choose a traditional casino or the promising new options from international markets? We invite you to follow this journey, discovering the real stories behind the seemingly ordinary headlines. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next content. All information in this video is compiled from trade reports, public data, and official documents as of August 2025. Please note, this video is not intended as political propaganda, is not aimed at any individual or organization, and does not represent any government. Our sole goal is to bring you an insight and help you better understand the major changes that are affecting the U.S. economy and society. We can't just let this go without reflection. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the future of the U.S. casino and tourism industry? Can legacy brands bounce back? Let's discuss. Imagine walking into an airport where the buzz, the laughter, and the raw emotion of travelers have been almost completely extinguished. This isn't some scene from a post-apocalyptic movie, nor is it a place forgotten by time. This is just another Friday in the heart of the United States. Only a few years ago, this was a place where dreams, adventures, and fortunes took flight. Today, the terminals are filled with an unnerving silence and rows upon rows of empty seats. Tourists no longer crowd the hallways. The Japanese have stopped coming to Hawaii. Germans no longer explore San Francisco, and even Americans are avoiding their own domestic flights. What in God's name is happening behind this catastrophic collapse? Today, I'm going to show you 10 airports that tell a story far deeper and more infuriating than just canceled flights. This is a story about a seismic shift in how the world, and its own citizens, views the United States and its tourism industry. Stick with me to the end and subscribe, because the airport that was once a beloved gateway for millions has now earned a terrifying new nickname among those who dare to visit. Airport number 10. San Francisco International Airport, SFO. For decades, San Francisco was the undisputed jewel of the West Coast. It was the cradle of the tech revolution, the home of behemoths like Uber and Airbnb, and a dream destination for millions across the globe. But in 2025, something shattered. Drastically, San Francisco International Airport, one of the nation's most critical hubs, began to hemorrhage passengers. In the first few months of the year alone, an astonishing 6 international airlines, including giants like Lufthansa, Air China, and ANA, completely axed their direct flights. The result? A staggering loss of 800,000 passengers. The concourses that once pulsed with the energy of global travelers are now cavernous and deserted. The food courts are shuttered, and a sickening number of check-in counters stand completely vacant. But let's be brutally clear. The airport's downfall isn't the fault of its service or some technical issue. The real reason, the rot, is festering right outside its doors, on the city's streets. San Francisco, once a beacon of innovation and freedom, is now suffering a visible, undeniable crisis that slaps every visitor in the face. Homeless encampments fester just steps from the airport terminals. Luxury businesses are boarding up their windows after being bled dry by constant brazen theft. A pervasive sense of lawlessness and insecurity now repels even the most adventurous tourists. How have we allowed this to happen? The so-called richest city in the United States, the headquarters for the world's most brilliant minds, cannot even guarantee the basic safety of its own front door. SFO, the airport that once connected the world to California's Golden Coast, is being left in the dust. The CEOs have already fled to Miami, to Austin, or even out of the country entirely. And the travelers? They've simply stopped coming. Can a city like San Francisco recover from this self-inflicted wound? Perhaps. But the infuriating question isn't when, but who in their right mind would dare to be the first to return. Airport No. 9. Detroit Metropolitan Airport, DTW. Can you even fathom walking through a major international airport and feeling like time has literally frozen? That is the soul-crushing experience many now face when they step into Detroit Metropolitan Airport. This place was once hailed as the symbol of the city's rebirth after its devastating industrial collapse. Today, it feels like a silent, hollow echo of what it once was. The automatic doors slide open to greet no one. The chairs sit empty, gathering dust. The flight information boards display destinations that no longer depart from its gates. The imagery is so profoundly bleak, it feels like a set piece from a dystopian film. And that is not an exaggeration. The flow of international passengers has plummeted by nearly 60% since the pre-pandemic era. An Uber driver, who used to make his entire living shuttling people to and from the airport, summed up the despair perfectly. I used to come here for 10 trips in a row. Today, if I'm lucky, I bring someone who's leaving and never coming back. This isn't just a reflection of a dip in tourism. It's a symptom of a much deeper, more systemic disease. Airlines have slashed direct international routes. Now to get here from Europe or Asia, you're forced to endure multiple layovers, making Detroit an increasingly unattractive and inconvenient option. But what's truly alarming, what should make your blood boil, is that this emptiness is creating a vacuum that's sucking the life out of the entire region. An entire ecosystem of jobs, hotels, restaurants, transportation services, local shops, is being extinguished as the airport's lights dim. While other cities are reinventing themselves with massive investments, vibrant tourism campaigns, and global events, Detroit continues to be shackled by its old ghosts. Crippling public debt, pervasive insecurity, and a horrifying degree of institutional abandonment. Perhaps the most disturbing part isn't seeing the empty tarmacs, but feeling the palpable sense that hope itself has taken a one-way flight out with no return ticket. Will Detroit ever manage to rise from the ashes again? Or is it being methodically erased from the international travel map right before our very eyes? Airport number 8, Daniel K. Inouye International Airport, Honolulu, HNL. There was a time when Honolulu was synonymous with paradise. It was that dream destination for millions, especially Japanese tourists, who would arrive with their eyes shining with pure excitement. But today, walking through its main airport feels like wandering through a faded memory. The joyous laughter that once filled the terminals has been replaced by an uncomfortable, heavy silence. Since 2019, the number of Japanese visitors has fallen off a cliff. Countless flights from Tokyo, Osaka, and Sapporo have simply vanished from the radar. The result is a wasteland. Over 40 shops have been shuttered. Restaurants sit without customers, and employees who once served hundreds of people a day now see only a handful per week. But what is really going on here? Some will try to tell you this is just a post-pandemic tourism slump. That's a lie. The truth is far more damning. On Asian social media platforms, a new and disturbing narrative is taking hold. Young Japanese, South Korean, and Chinese travelers are openly stating that they no longer feel welcome in the United States. They cite rampant insecurity, a cold and indifferent attitude, and a deeply tarnished image of the country. To make matters worse, diplomatic tensions and disastrous policy decisions made in Washington, often without any consideration for local realities, have hammered Hawaii, whose economy is almost entirely dependent on those very visitors. And while all this unfolds, you have to ask yourself in sheer frustration, who pays the price for this incompetence? Honolulu, a jewel of the Pacific, appears to be fading away before our very eyes. It's as if the United States is actively forgetting about its own paradise. Is Hawaii still that dream destination we saw in postcards? We want to know your opinion. If you've ever been to Honolulu, do you still hold those vibrant memories, or do you feel that something has been broken forever? Airport number 7, Harry Reid International Airport, Las Vegas, LAS. A shocking paradox is unfolding in the middle of the Nevada desert. Las Vegas, the city of eternal lights, of endless parties, of spontaneous weddings and glittering casinos, seems to have had its volume turned way down. Its airport, which once welcomed teeming crowds with suitcases full of dreams and phones ready for Instagram selfies, now feels as empty as a stage after the final curtain call. According to recent, horrifying data, the number of international passengers arriving at Harry Reid Airport has plummeted by more than 59% compared to 2019. Where you once heard dozens of languages spoken at once, you now only hear the monotonous hum of the air conditioning. A receptionist at one of the grand hotels on the Strip confessed something deeply unsettling. Before, tourists from China, Korea, and Australia filled the lobby. Now I can hear my own footsteps for my entire shift. So what the hell is happening? Part of the answer lies in the new, almost insurmountable barriers to entering the United States. Complicated visa applications, exhausting entry processes, and a general feeling that the country is no longer as welcoming as it once was, are actively driving people away. Many travelers, especially from Asia, have simply rerouted their plans. Tokyo, Paris, and Seoul now seem more accessible, safer, and more modern. Tourism from Asia has collapsed by 46%, and major airlines have canceled direct flights to Las Vegas. But this isn't just a tourism crisis. It's a symbol of something far more profound. If Las Vegas, the glittering emblem of the American dream, is starting to empty out, what other cities are next? Is the United States losing its magic to the rest of the world? Perhaps this isn't just a temporary pause, but the dawn of a new era, one where the world's travelers choose other destinations for their dreams. What do you think? Would you still choose the United States for your next vacation? It's a question that's becoming harder and harder to answer with a yes. Airport number 6, Portland International Airport, PDX. For years, Portland International Airport, known as PDX, was much more than a simple point of arrival or departure. It was a symbol of pride for the entire Pacific Northwest region. However, today, that constant, lively buzz of international travelers has devolved into an unsettling silence. Countless gates and seats that were once filled with people are now just empty, forgotten spaces. A case that perfectly illustrates this grim reality is that of an Australian couple who had dreamed of touring the west coast of the United States. At the last minute, They decided to cancel their trip to Portland and redirect their adventure to Vancouver, Canada. Why? Because the relentless news reports of protests, riots, and an environment of pervasive insecurity have bred a deep and growing distrust among those who might consider visiting the city. The consequence of this is utterly devastating. In just 2 years, PDX has lost up to 75% of its international flights. This is not just a cold statistic. It is a reflection of a much deeper, more cancerous problem. Where travelers from Europe and Asia once landed, drawn by the region's unique nature, open culture, and authentic style, those flights have now silently vanished. The decline of this airport has become a powerful, infuriating symbol. If Portland, a place that once represented hope and diversity, is beginning to close its doors to the world, what does that tell us about the future of the city and its connection to the globe? It tells us that we are failing. I invite you to write in the comments what you think about this catastrophic situation the United States is experiencing. Airport number 5. O'Hare International Airport, Chicago, ORD. Can you imagine walking through one of the largest and busiest airports in the world and feeling like you're in a ghost town? That is exactly what is happening at O'Hare, Chicago's enormous international airport. 4 of its international terminals remain closed due to a catastrophic lack of passengers. Key routes to global hubs like Frankfurt, Seoul, and Toronto have been eliminated with no return date in sight. Compared to 2019, the number of international travelers has collapsed by more than 55%, leaving behind empty corridors, shuttered duty-free shops, and restaurants with their blinds drawn. The vibrant hustle and bustle that once represented the heart of this terminal is now just a distant, hollow echo. But the problem goes far beyond ticket sales or occasional tourism. International airlines are actively prioritizing other cities like Boston, Seattle, or even Toronto because they consider them to be more stable destinations. And why wouldn't they? Chicago's image has been brutally battered since the riots of 2020, where scenes of chaos, protests, and mass looting in the city center went viral across the globe. This planted a seed of profound distrust, especially among European and Asian tourists who now prefer to avoid a destination that was once a symbol of modernity, culture, and global connection. An airport worker summed it up with raw honesty. "We used to get groups from Germany, Korea, or Brazil every week. Today, my schedule is empty, and half of the staff has been laid off." Chicago, the 3rd largest city in the United States, appears to be losing its place on the world map. Not for lack of infrastructure, but because of an invisible wound, the complete loss of trust. And this wound doesn't just affect tourism. It devastates small businesses, the families who depend on the airport for their livelihood, and the image of an entire country that was once synonymous with opportunity. If this is happening to Chicago, what is happening to the rest of the nation? Airport number 4. Denver International Airport, DEN. Can you picture entering one of the largest airports in the United States and feeling like you're wandering through a ghost city? That is the state of Denver International Airport today. No lines, no hustle, no buzz. Suitcases roll along by themselves, check-in counters are vacant, and boarding gates look more like museum displays than portals to the world. A place that once connected millions of people now seems to have completely lost its way. What happened to this vibrant hub that once united coasts, families, and dreams? In just a few short months, Denver has lost over 400 domestic flights, a number that should be unthinkable for a city that used to handle 70 million passengers a year. But the problem runs deeper than the price of fuel. Ticket prices have become obscenely, prohibitively expensive. A mother from Colorado confessed that taking her son to see his grandmother in Florida now costs nearly $900 for a round trip. A journey that was once commonplace is now an unaffordable luxury. And the most curious, most infuriating part is that while domestic flights are collapsing, more and more Americans are choosing to fly abroad. Portugal, Greece, Colombia, places where traveling, eating, and feeling welcome is cheaper than it is in their own damn country. What was once a source of national pride has now turned into resignation. Denver isn't just losing flights, it's losing its very essence as a meeting point. It no longer connects cultures or unites families. The question is deeply unsettling. Is the American dream deflating with every canceled flight? Are we living in an age where it's easier to escape this country than to stay in it? Airport number 3, Philadelphia International Airport, PHL. In 2025, what was once a source of national pride now generates bewilderment and outrage. Philadelphia, the very symbol of liberty and the birth of American democracy, is experiencing an alarming decline. Its international airport, which used to connect thousands of tourists to the living history of the nation, is now known for something entirely different. Absolute chaos. Endless queues, mountains of lost luggage, passengers sleeping on the floor, and a level of customer service that seems to have vanished entirely. Negative online reviews have skyrocketed by 300% in just 6 months, and airlines have already started cutting flights to the city. But the problem goes far beyond canceled flights. The city is experiencing a kind of silent, creeping abandonment. A lack of budget, incompetent administration, and the exodus of thousands of residents have directly impacted essential services, including the maintenance of the airport. One tourist reported waiting more than 3 hours just to exit the terminal, describing the place as a lawless zone where no one seems to be in charge. American Airlines has pulled key connections from Europe and the Caribbean, drastically reducing the arrival of international tourists who now, quite sensibly, prefer to fly into New York or Washington, D.C. This forces a deeper, more painful reflection. How can a city with so much history reach this point of collapse? How does the cradle of independence become the poster child for modern urban decay? Philadelphia is no longer synonymous with culture or living history, but with chaos and neglect. The big question now is whether this city can recover, or if it will be sadly remembered as another fallen symbol of the decline of America's historic centers. What do you think? Does Philadelphia deserve a second chance, or is it time to look for other destinations? Airport number 2, Orlando International Airport, MCO. There was a time when Orlando's airport was synonymous with pure excitement. It was the magical gateway that connected millions of families with the worlds of Disney, Harry Potter, and Jurassic Park. Every day, children would run off the planes dreaming of meeting their heroes. But today, that excitement has vanished.